The scent of fresh brewed coffee mingled with the sharp aroma of lye soap when Mary Ann Carter pushed open the door to Mr. Higgins' general store that morning in August 1947. The sun was still struggling to pierce the cold mist rolling down from the hills, and she needed black thread to finish Mrs. Gerald's morning dress. Her steps were light on the worn wooden floor, and she already had the copper coin ready in her palm when she heard the silence. It wasn't just any silence. It was that heavy, loaded silence, the kind that makes your skin crawl and your stomach tie into knots. The three women standing near the counter, Mrs. Agnes, Mrs. Zola, and Mrs. Josephine, had stopped talking the exact moment she walked in. They turned their faces with a deliberate, studied slowness, and Mary Ann felt the weight of their gazes descending upon her like molten lead. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. "Mrs. Agnes sniffed loudly, turning her face away as if she had smelled something foul. Mrs. Josephine whispered something into Mrs. Zola's ear, and the two of them chuckled, that low, malicious laughter that held no joy. Mr. Higgins, behind the counter, was cleaning the same glass for the third time, his eyes glued to the cloth as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. "Mr. Higgins," Mary Ann called out, keeping her head held high, "I need a spool of black thread, please." The old shopkeeper finally looked up, but before he could answer, Mrs. Agnes let out a loud, harsh laugh. "Black thread? Of course it's black thread. That one only wears mourning anyway. Mourning for a belly that will never grow." Mary Ann's heart hammered against her ribs. She had known these women since she was born. She had grown up playing with their children, had sewn the communion dresses for their granddaughters. But in the last 3 years, since she was widowed by Tony without leaving a single child, she had become something else in their eyes. Something lesser. Something broken. "Don't pay them any mind, Mary," Mr. Higgins murmured, finally grabbing the spool. People's tongues speak the truth," Mrs. Zola cut in, slapping her hand on the counter. "A woman who doesn't give a child is good for nothing. She's a dry tree, barren earth. It's a punishment. It has to be." "Punishment for what?" Mary Ann heard her own voice rise louder than she intended. "What am I guilty of, Mrs. Zola? Of being born this way? Of losing my husband? Of waking up every day and working until my fingers bleed so I don't have to beg anyone for a dime?" If you're enjoying this true story from the countryside, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. And hit the bell. Mrs. Josephine took a step forward, her small eyes shining with a cold cruelty. "Guilty of wanting what you can't have. We've heard, you know, that you've got your eye on the widower, John Sterling, that you've been going to his farm, sewing for his boys. You think we don't know?" Blood rushed to Mary Ann's face. "I work. I sew for those who pay me. What is wrong with that?" "What is wrong?" Mrs. Agnes spat the words like stones. "Is that you're looking to put your hands on a family that isn't yours. Those boys need a real mother, not a—" "Say it!" Mary Ann felt the tears burning, but she didn't let a single one fall. "Say what you want to say. Say that I'm dried up, that I'm half a woman, that I'm worth nothing. Say it!" The silence that fell was worse than the words. Mrs. Agnes turned her back with a scornful huff. Mrs. Zola shook her head, as one looks at something irretrievably lost. Mrs. Josephine gave a poisonous little smile. "I don't need to say it," she said softly, venomously. "Everyone already knows. Even John will know, sooner or later. An upright man like him won't want to mix with a cursed woman. He's already lost a wife. He won't want another who can't even give him a son." Mary Ann took the spool that Mr. Higgins had left on the counter. placed the coin beside it, and walked out without looking back. But as soon as the door closed behind her, she heard the laughter. Loud, mocking, without a shred of mercy. The dirt road was empty at that hour of the morning. The mist still covered the distant mountains, and the cold cut through the thin shawl she wore over her shoulders. Marianne walked fast, head down, eyes fixed on her own dusty shoes. Each step kicked up a small cloud of red dust. When she reached her small cottage, 2 simple rooms, a tiny yard with 3 chickens, and a blackberry bush, she finally let the tears fall. She sat on the doorstep, the spool of thread clutched in her hand, and wept. She wept for the humiliation, for the scorn, for the loneliness that weighed on her shoulders like a burden of stone. But more than anything, she wept because it was true. She had become attached to that job at John Sterling's farm. She had started waiting for Thursday mornings, when he would come to pick up the finished clothes and bring new ones to mend. She had caught herself thinking about his serious eyes, his deep voice, the firm but gentle way he treated his children. And that was wrong. It had to be wrong, because she had nothing to offer a man like that. What she didn't know was that at that exact moment, 5 miles away, at Cross Creek Farm, John Sterling was listening to the same gossip. But his reaction would be very, very different. Cross Creek Farm occupied a generous stretch of land, good for cattle and crops, with a whitewashed farmhouse, a wide porch, and an immense yard. John had inherited everything from his father and had transformed the property into one of the most prosperous in the region through hard work and honesty. He was a man of his word, known for paying on time and treating his workers well. That morning, he was in the corral checking on a cow that had just calved when he heard the voices of the washerwomen near the tank. Usually, he paid no mind to chatter. He had more important things to worry about, but the name he heard made him stop. Poor Marianne. She's being massacred down at the store. It was the voice of Bernice, an old washerwoman who had worked for him for 20 years. Massacred why? Asked Kitty, younger, as she scrubbed clothes on the stone. Oh, because of him, of course. Bernice lowered her voice, but not enough. The old biddies are saying she wants to snag the boss, that she's making a play for him, wants to be a mother to his boys. They called her every ugly name in the book. John felt anger rise like boiling water. He dropped the fence post he was fixing and walked to the tank with heavy strides. The 2 washerwomen jumped when they saw him. "Mr. John, we didn't know you were nearby." "What is this story?" His voice came out deeper than usual. "What names did they call Mrs. Marianne?" Bernice swallowed hard. Boss, you know how gossiping women are." "Speak." The old washerwoman looked at Kitty, then back at the boss. "They said she's dried up, that she's good for nothing, that she's half a woman because she can't have children. Mrs. Agnes even said it was a punishment, that a woman like that brings bad luck." John's jaw tightened. He stood in silence for a long moment, hands clenched into fists, eyes fixed on some distant point. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold as ice. "Bernice, Kitty, you 2 are going back to the village right now, and you're going to spread a message from me. To Mrs. Agnes, to Mrs. Zola, to Mrs. Josephine, and to anyone else with a loose tongue. Tell them this: John Sterling says that the next person who speaks ill of Mrs. Marianne will have to answer to him personally." The 2 washerwomen widened their eyes. "But boss," Bernice started. "No buts. Mrs. Marianne is an honest, hard-working woman who never did harm to anyone. If she sews for me and my children, It's because I paid for it. It is honest work. And I will not let a bunch of venomous tongues destroy a decent woman's name. But the ladies will say you're defending her because... Kitty left the sentence hanging. Because what? Say it. The girl lowered her eyes. Because you fancy her. John stood quiet for an instant. The morning wind swayed the branches of the oak tree near the tank, and a bird sang somewhere. When he answered, his voice was lower, but steady as rock. And if I do, whose business is that? But that's not what's at stake. What's at stake is respect. And on this land, as long as I have a voice, no one will humiliate a hard-working woman for not being able to have a child. That is the way of ignorant, cruel people, and I won't accept it. He turned his back and returned to the corral, leaving the two washerwomen open-mouthed. But the message was delivered, and in less than 2 hours, it was already running from mouth to mouth throughout the village of Oak Creek. Mary Ann was bent over her sewing table, eyes red, but hands steady as she passed the needle through the morning dress, when she heard the knock on the door. It was noon, the sun heating the tin roof, making the small house hot as an oven. "It's open," she shouted, without looking up from her work. The door creaked, and she heard heavy footsteps, boots on wood. When she raised her head, she gasped. John Sterling was standing in the doorway, leather hat in hand, filling the entire frame with his height and broad shoulders. The sunlight behind him cast an almost unreal silhouette. "Mr. John." She stood up so quickly the chair almost tipped over. "I'm sorry. I didn't expect. Do you need something?" He entered slowly, taking his hat off completely, his serious eyes scanning the tiny house. There was order there. Simplicity, but order. The few pieces of furniture were clean. There was a small vase with flowers in the window. And organized piles of fabric and clothes to be sewn occupied a corner. "Mrs. Mary Ann," he said, his deep voice echoing in the small house. "I came here because of what happened this morning at the store." Her heart plummeted. So the gossip had already reached him. It had already poisoned everything. She felt her cheeks burn with shame. "Mr. John, I can explain. I didn't do anything wrong, I swear. I was just buying thread, and they started saying horrible things. But I never intended to." "I know," he interrupted her, taking a step forward. "I know you didn't do anything wrong. That's why I came here." Mary Ann blinked, confused. "How?" John placed his hat on the sewing table and looked directly into her eyes. His gaze was intense, serious, but there was something protective there, something steady. "I sent a message to Mrs. Agnes, Mrs. Zola, Mrs. Josephine, and everyone with a big mouth in this town. I said that the next person who speaks ill of you will have to answer to me, personally." The silence that fell was absolute. Mary Ann felt her legs go weak. She blinked several times, trying to process what she had just heard. You did what?" "You heard me right." John crossed his arms over his broad chest. "I won't allow them to mistreat an honest, hard-working woman who never harmed a soul. What happened today was pure cruelty, and I don't accept that." "But, Mr. John," her voice came out trembling, "you don't understand. Now they'll talk even more. They'll say you're defending me because I care about you?" His words hung suspended in the hot air of the house. Mary Ann felt the world spin. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. "You can't say that," she whispered. "You can't. I can't. I'm not worth..." "Not worth what?" His voice grew harder. "Who said that? Those women? They know nothing about you. They don't know about your work, your dignity, how you get up every day and fight to survive with your head held high. But they are right about one thing. Marianne felt the tears return. I can't give a child to any man. And you have 3 children who need a mother. They need someone who can give them brothers and sisters, who can continue your family. I can't give that. John took another step toward her. Now he was so close that Marianne could smell the scent of leather and earth on him, could see the strands of gray hair at his temples, could see the determination burning in those dark eyes. Do you think I care about that? You should care, she said, her voice breaking. Every man cares. It's what makes a woman a real woman. It's what— No, he cut in, firmly. That is what those snakes told you, but it isn't true. A woman isn't worth her belly. She is worth her character, her heart, her strength. Marianne shook her head, tears flowing freely now. You're saying this now, but in time, you'll change your mind. You'll see that you need. I lost my wife 2 years ago, John said, his voice getting lower, hoarser. I lost her and the baby she was carrying. It was the most painful thing I ever lived through. And since then, I raised my 3 children alone, with help from my aunt. Until their clothes started getting too tattered, and Aunt Martha suggested I call a seamstress. He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. When you arrived at the farm for the first time, 6 months ago, I saw a quiet, serious woman who barely lifted her eyes from the ground. But I also saw the way she treated my children, with care, with attention, how she measured each one with patience, asked what colors they liked, smiled when my youngest boy said he wanted star buttons on his shirt. And you put on star buttons, Mrs. Marianne. You did, even though you weren't paid for it. Marianne remembered. Pete, the youngest, 6 years old, with bright eyes and a toothless grin. He had talked about star buttons with such excitement that she hadn't been able to resist. She had searched through all her saved buttons until she found 3 star-shaped ones, tiny but perfect. Since then, John continued, I wait for Thursdays. I wait to bring the clothes, to pick up the finished ones, to hear you speak with that quiet voice about fabrics and seams. My children ask about you. Pete wants to know when the button lady is coming back. Anthony, the middle one, said he wants to learn to sew like you. And Tess, my 10-year-old girl, asked me if you could teach her cross-stitch. Marianne's heart was beating so hard she could hear it. Mr. John, I don't know what will happen between us, he said, his voice firm but gentle. I don't know if you feel what I feel. But I know one thing. I won't let anyone humiliate you. I won't let those cruel women destroy someone I admire. Someone I— He stopped, as if the next words were too heavy. Someone I want to protect, he finished. Someone I want to know better. Someone who, perhaps, one day, can be more than the seamstress for my children. Marianne couldn't stop crying, but now they were different tears. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of something she didn't even know how to name. It was as if a giant hand had loosened the pressure on her chest, allowing her to breathe for the first time in 3 years. But what about your children, she whispered, and your family, and what will people say? John grabbed his hat from the table and put it back on his head. At the door, he turned one last time. My children already like you. My family will learn to respect who I choose to respect. And the people? Well, the people will have to swallow it, because John Sterling doesn't bow his head to gossip, and he won't let anyone step on whom he decided to protect. He walked out, leaving the door open. Marianne saw his silhouette against the sunlight, mounting his horse with sure movements. Before leaving, he shouted, Thursday, I'm coming to get the shirts, as always. And he rode off at a gallop, kicking up red dust from the road. Marianne stood there, tears still wetting her face. Heart beating out of rhythm. For the first time in 3 years, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. hope. But what she didn't know was that the farmer John's act of defense had lit a bonfire of rage in the hearts of the village women. And when powerful women, used to controlling everything and everyone through gossip and judgment, feel challenged, they don't rest until they destroy the object of their hate. The war had only just begun. And behind the scenes of this war, a secret waited in the shadows. A secret about Marianne's past. A secret that, when brought to light, would change everything. Absolutely everything. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? I want to know where you guys are from. The news spread through the village like fire in dry grass. In less than a day, all of Oak Creek knew that the farmer, John Sterling, had issued a public ultimatum in defense of Marianne Carter, the sterile widow. The reactions were explosive. In Mr. Higgins' store, Mrs. Agnes slammed her hand on the counter so hard, she made the jars of candy rattle. Who does this man think he is? King? Emperor? Can't we speak our minds in our own town anymore? Mrs. Zola shook her head, lips pressed into a thin line. It's her. That woman put a spell on him. There's no other explanation. A respectable widower like John, with 3 kids to raise, getting involved with a dried-up woman? There's something wrong with that. Mrs. Josephine, the most venomous of the 3, smiled with malice. Leave it to me. I'm going to find out what this Marianne is hiding. Every woman has her rot, and when I discover hers, not even John will be able to defend her. Meanwhile, in Marianne's tiny house, she passed the needle through the fabric, with hands that trembled slightly. Every stitch was an attempt to calm the storm inside her chest. John had done that for her. He had placed himself between her and the wolves. But why? What did a man like him gain by defending a marked woman like her? The answer came the following Thursday when he appeared to pick up the shirts. The sun was high and hot when Marianne heard the trot of the horse. She wiped her hands on her apron, smoothed her hair back into a simple bun, and went to open the door. John was dismounting the animal with that sure, steady manner that made him seem even bigger than he already was. "Mrs. Marianne," he greeted, taking off his hat. "Good morning." "Good morning, Mr. John," she replied, voice low. "The shirts are ready, all perfect, just as you asked." She brought the cloth bundle, tied with care. John took it, but didn't move to leave. He stood there, hat in hands, as if searching for words. "Are you all right?" he asked finally. After what happened, Marianne lowered her eyes. "I'm fine, yes, sir. But, Mr. John, you didn't need to do that. Now people are talking even more. They're saying I cast a spell on you, that I—" "Let them talk," he cut in, voice firm. "The tongues of ignorant people don't touch me, and they shouldn't touch you either." "But they do," she whispered. "They do because I don't have the protection you have. You are a man, a landowner, respected. I'm just a widowed seamstress who can't have a child. In the end, it's my word against the whole world's." John stood in silence for a long moment. The hot afternoon wind rustled the leaves of the blackberry bush in the yard, and from afar came the sound of a cart passing on the road. "My children are asking about you," he said, changing the subject. "Pete wants more star buttons. Tess said she wants to learn to sew. Anthony, well, Anthony is quiet, but I noticed he kept a scrap of fabric you left last time. Said he wanted to make a handkerchief for his aunt." Marianne's heart squeezed. "They are sweet children." "They are children who lost their mother too soon," John said, voice getting lower, "and who miss a woman's touch. My aunt does what she can, but she's 72. She's tired. And I don't know how to braid Tessa's hair. I don't know how to comfort Pete when he wakes up crying at night. I don't know how to teach Anthony to be gentle, because I only know how to be tough." Marianne looked up and saw something in the face of that big, strong man she had never seen before. Vulnerability, exhaustion, the deep mark of someone carrying a burden too heavy, alone, for too long. "Mr. John," she said softly, "you are a good father. Anyone who looks at those children sees that." "But it's not enough," he said, and there was raw pain in those words. "It's not enough to replace what they lost." The silence that fell between them was different. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people sharing a similar pain. The pain of loss. The pain of loneliness. The pain of waking up every day and having to be strong, even when all you want to do is crumble. "I wanted to invite you," John said, switching to a more informal tone, and Marianne noticed the shift. "Sunday there's church service, and afterward, I always host a lunch at the farm. My aunt cooks. I kill a chicken. The boys play in the yard. I wanted you to come." Marianne felt her blood run cold. "Mr. John, if I go to your house on a Sunday, people will talk. I know, but they'll talk anyway. So let's at least do what we want to do, not what they want us to do." "But what about your children? And your aunt? What will they think?" "My aunt was the one who suggested it," John said, a half smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. "Said I need company. And my children. Marianne, my children have asked 3 times when you were coming to visit us." She felt her eyes sting. How long had it been since anyone invited her to anything? How long had it been since anyone wanted her company, her presence, her existence in the same space? 3 years. 3 years of being invisible, unwanted, tolerated at best. I don't know if it's a good idea," she murmured. "Then come find out," he said, putting his hat back on his head. "Sunday, after church, I'll come by to pick you up." And before she could protest again, he was already mounting his horse and leaving a cloud of red dust in the hot air. Marianne stood in the doorway, heart beating out of rhythm, a whirlwind of emotions crossing her chest. Fear, hope, something that looked dangerously like happiness. But she also knew, with absolute certainty, that that invitation would be seen. It would be commented on. It would be turned into ammunition against her, and she was right. Sunday arrived with a cloudless blue sky and heat that promised to be scorching by noon. Marianne woke up before the sun rose, stomach churning with nervousness. She had spent Saturday night washing and ironing her only decent dress, a navy blue cotton one with small white flowers, faded from use but clean and well cared for. She combed her hair with care, pinning it in a bun at the nape of her neck, and put on the white shawl that had been her mother's. She looked at herself in the small cracked mirror hanging on the wall and saw a 28-year-old woman who looked 40. Hard work, pain, loneliness, everything was etched on her thin face, in her deep-set eyes, on her calloused hands. "You're crazy, Marianne," she said to her own reflection. "Crazy to accept this invitation, crazy to have hope." But even so, when John appeared with the buggy, and not on horseback, she noticed, because he had brought the buggy especially to pick her up in comfort, she walked out of the house with her head held high. The church service was a silent martyrdom. Marianne felt the stairs stick to her as soon as she entered the small chapel. She saw Mrs. Agnes nudging Mrs. Zola and pointing with her chin. She saw Mrs. Josephine whispering something into the ears of other women, all turning to look at her with that expression of poorly disguised contempt. John, beside her, seemed not to notice anything. Or if he noticed, he didn't care. He responded to the prayers with that deep, firm voice, sang the hymns looking straight at the altar. And when Father Anselm finished the final blessing, he offered his arm to Marianne naturally. "Shall we? The boys are anxious to see you." At the exit of the chapel, Mrs. Agnes blocked the path. She was a large woman, broad-shouldered and heavy-chested, used to intimidating with physical presence. "John Sterling," she said loudly, so everyone could hear. "What is this story of bringing this woman to church? Have you lost your mind?" The silence that fell was absolute. Everyone stopped to see the confrontation. Marianne felt her cheeks burn, but John just looked at Mrs. Agnes with icy calm. "Mrs. Agnes," he said, voice low but carrying to the last row of curious onlookers. "I brought a guest to the service and for lunch at my home. I didn't know I needed your permission." "Guest?" The woman spat the word. "Everyone knows what that one wants. She's got her eye on your farm, on your children, on your money." "Do you know Mrs. Marianne?" John asked, taking a step forward. "Do you know anything about her other than what venomous tongues spread? I know she can't have children. I know she's a dry woman, useless to any man who—" "Enough!" John's voice echoed like thunder. Several people took a step back. Marianne had never seen him truly angry, and now she understood why people respected and also feared him. He seemed to have grown 3 feet, broad shoulders blocking the sunlight, dark eyes burning with controlled fury. "You," he said, every word coming out slow, measured, heavy as lead, "will not speak of Mrs. Marianne in my presence again. You will not speak ill of her anywhere, because if I hear that you or anyone else continues with this cruelty, I will take measures. And you know John Sterling makes no empty threats." "What measures?" Mrs. Agnes tried to maintain her pose, but her voice trembled. "Keep it up and find out." He turned to the rest of the people watching open-mouthed. "And that goes for everyone. Mrs. Marianne is an honest, hard-working, decent woman. If I chose her company, if my children like her, if I want her at my Sunday table, that is nobody's business. And whoever doesn't like it can swallow it, because I won't change my mind." He offered his arm again to Marianne, who was trembling from head to toe. She took it, and the two crossed the crowd in silence. People parted like the sea before Moses, no one daring to say another word. Only when they were in the buggy, already leaving the village toward the farm, did Marianne manage to speak. "Why do you do this?" she asked, voice broken. "Why do you expose yourself like this for my sake? You don't know me. You know nothing about me. Why risk your reputation, your name, everything, for someone like me?" John guided the horses in silence for a few minutes. The dirt road rose gently toward the hills, flanked by green pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. The smell of earth and grass was in the air, and the blue sky stretched infinite above them. "Because I see you," he said finally. "I see you for real, and what I see isn't what those women say. I see a woman strong enough to wake up every day even when the whole world says you're worth nothing. I see someone who works until her fingers bleed so she doesn't depend on anyone. I see kindness in your eyes when you look at my children. I see hidden pain, but also dignity. And that, Marianne, that is worth more than 1,000 fertile bellies." If you're liking this story, leave a like. And answer me, could you live in this era, with all this social judgment? Tears ran free down her face. She didn't try to hide them. For the first time in 3 years, someone had looked at her and seen the person she really was. Not the sterile widow, not the marked woman, just Marianne, just her. "I'm afraid," she confessed softly. "Afraid you'll find out things about me and change your mind. Afraid of getting attached and losing everything again. Afraid of believing I can be happy and having it ripped away from me." "Then let's be afraid together," John said, looking at her for the first time since they left the chapel. "Because I am too. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid of failing my children. Afraid of opening up again and losing once more. But you know what I discovered? Fear only wins if we let it. And I'm tired of letting it." Cross Creek Farm appeared at the top of the hill, the White House gleaming in the sun, the wide yard, the organized corrals. And at the gate, 3 children waited, jumping with anxiety. "It's her! It's the button lady!" Pete shouted when the buggy approached. Tess, the 10-year-old girl with long, disheveled hair, smiled shyly but excitedly. And Anthony, the middle one, held something in his hands, a carefully folded fabric handkerchief which he had tried to embroider himself. It was crooked, irregular, but Marianne saw the effort and affection in every clumsy stitch. When she stepped down from the buggy, Pete ran and threw himself into her arms. The gesture was so unexpected, so natural, so full of pure trust, that Marianne almost lost her balance. She looked at John over the boy's head and saw something in his eyes that made her heart race. Hope, possibility, a future that perhaps, just perhaps, could be different. "Come see my room." Pete pulled her hand. "I have a wooden bird that Dad made." "Show her later, Pete." An old woman's voice came from the porch. It was Aunt Martha, small and bent, but with lively, intelligent eyes. "Let the lady breathe, boy. Welcome, Mrs. Marianne. John spoke much of you." Lunch was a revelation. The table was full of simple but plentiful food. Rice, beans, roast chicken, collard greens, cornbread, gravy. The children talked all at the same time, telling stories, asking questions, laughing. John presided at the head of the table with that firm presence, but Marianne noticed how he became lighter there with his children, how he smiled more, how the hardness of his face softened. And Aunt Martha, sitting beside Marianne, said softly in the middle of lunch, "It's been a long time since I've seen my nephew like this, more alive. Thank you for that." After lunch, while the men rested in the shade and Aunt Martha took a nap, Marianne found herself in the yard with Tess. The girl had brought a needle, thread, and a piece of fabric. "Can you teach me?" she asked, big hopeful eyes. "To do cross-stitch like you?" Marianne sat in the shade of the mango tree, Tess beside her, and began to teach. Stitch by stitch, slowly, with patience. The girl's hands trembled with anxiety, making mistakes, starting over, but not giving up. "Did my mother know how to sew?" Tess asked suddenly, voice low. Marianne felt her heart squeeze. "I didn't know your mother, dear." "She died when I was 8, the girl said, eyes fixed on the fabric. "I remember her. I remember her smell, the way she sang. But I'm starting to forget other things, and that hurts." Marianne put down the sewing and hugged the girl. Tess melted into that embrace, and Marianne felt the dampness of the child's tears wetting her dress. "You will never forget her completely," Marianne whispered, "because she is here." She touched the girl's chest, and here, touched her forehead. "In your memories, in your way of being, in everything she taught you. And no one can take that away from you." "But I wanted her here," Tess sobbed. "I wanted to be able to hug her for real." "I know, honey, I know." John was watching from afar. He saw the scene under the mango tree, his daughter in that woman's arms, crying, being comforted with a tenderness he didn't know how to offer. And something inside him broke and mended at the same time. That afternoon, as the sun went down slowly, dyeing the sky orange and pink, Marianne said goodbye to the children. Pete made her promise she would come back. Anthony, quiet as ever, gave her the crooked handkerchief he had made, and Tess hugged her tight, whispering, "Come back soon." In the buggy, returning to the village in the twilight, John and Marianne sat in silence for a long time. But it was a comfortable silence, complete, as if both were processing something too big for words. "Thank you," she said finally. "For today, for everything." "Coming back next week?" he asked. "John," she began. "Please." There was something vulnerable in that request. "The children, they need you, and I—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Marianne had seen it in his eyes. She had felt it in the way he looked at her. And for the first time in 3 years, she allowed that warm, frightening feeling, full of possibilities, to grow in her chest. "I'll come back," she promised. But when the buggy stopped in front of her little house, already dark, Marianne saw something that made her blood run cold. The door was open, and on the threshold, lit by the lamp burning inside the house, stood Mrs. Josephine with a venomous smile on her face. In her hand, an old, yellowed envelope. "Look who's here," Josephine said, voice sweet as poisoned honey. "The saint, the poor thing, the one who fooled everyone." John jumped down from the buggy, placing himself in front of Marianne. "What are you doing in her house?" Discovering the truth, Josephine waved the envelope in the air. "The truth that this woman hid from everyone, including you, John. And when the town knows, when you know, you'll understand why she deserves nothing of what you're offering." Marianne felt her legs go weak. She knew what was in that envelope. She knew, and the terror she felt was absolute. After everything, after starting to have hope, after feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, she could be happy again, the past had returned to destroy her. And this time, not even the lion John could protect her. The silence that fell was like the silence before thunder, heavy, electric, pregnant with imminent destruction. Mrs. Josephine held the yellowed envelope like a trophy, small eyes shining with cruel satisfaction. Marianne couldn't move, feet nailed to the dirt floor, heart beating so loud she could hear it in her ears. "Give me that." John extended his hand, voice low and dangerous. "Ah, no." Josephine took a step back, protecting the envelope against her chest. "This here is Mrs. Marianne's property. Found it inside her house, along with other interesting little things. Letters, documents, secrets she kept very well hidden." "You broke into my house." Marianne finally found her voice, but it came out trembling, weak. "You had no right, right?" Josephine let out a harsh laugh. "You want to talk about rights? After lying to everyone? After playing the poor thing, the victim? When in truth," she waved the envelope in the air, "in truth, you are the guilty one of everything." John took a step forward, and there was something threatening in his posture that made even Josephine recoil. "I won't ask again. Give me that." "John," Marianne's voice came out broken. "Let her." He turned to look at her, confusion in his eyes. "What?" Marianne felt tears burning, but this time she didn't let any fall. She had cried too much in this life. She had bowed too much. She had let them step on her too many times. And now, looking at that envelope that held her most painful past, she made a decision. "Let her show it," Marianne said, voice getting firmer. "If that's what she wants, if that's what everyone wants to know, then let them know." "Marianne," John started. "No." She raised her hand, interrupting him. Her eyes went from his to Josephine. "Go. Tell him. Tell everything that's in that envelope. Every word. Every detail. Tell the truth I spent 3 years hiding." Josephine blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected that reaction. She expected begging, tears, despair. But Marianne was standing there, head held high, awaiting the final blow with a dignity that left even the gossip-monger disconcerted for a moment. "Are you sure?" Josephine asked, but she was already opening the envelope. "Because once I speak, there is no going back. Everyone will know." "Speak." Josephine pulled an official paper from the envelope, yellowed by time. By the weak light of the lamp coming from inside the house, she began to read aloud, savoring every word as if it were sweet poison. "Medical certificate. Patient, Mary Ann Carter, then Miller. Date, March 15th, 1944. She paused dramatically. Diagnosis: sterility resulting from complications of an abortion performed at 16 years of age. The world seemed to stop. John stood completely motionless. Josephine continued relentless. Procedure performed in secret resulted in severe infection and irreversible damage to the uterus. Patient was informed she will never be able to conceive. The silence that fell was absolute. Even the crickets seemed to have stopped singing. Josephine folded the paper slowly, the triumphant smile on her lips. "So that's it," she said, voice too sweet. "The poor thing, the victim, the one everyone judges unfairly, is actually a baby killer. Killed her own child. That's why God punished her, leaving her dry for the rest of her life." Marianne closed her eyes. There it was, the truth she had carried alone, like a stone in her chest, the guilt that suffocated her every night. The secret that had turned her life into a silent hell. When she opened her eyes, she met John's gaze. He was pale, hands clenched into fists by his sides, jaw locked. She couldn't read his expression. Disgust? Disappointment? Anger? "Go," she said to him, voice coming out firmer than she expected. "Go away. Take your children far from me. Josephine is right. I'm no good. Never was." "Finally, you admit it." Josephine crossed her arms, satisfied. But John didn't move. He kept looking at Marianne, and there was something working behind those dark eyes, something she couldn't identify. "How old were you?" he asked, voice hoarse. Marianne blinked. "What? When this happened? How old were you?" 16, she whispered. "I was 16 years old." "And the father of the child? Where was he?" The tears finally began to fall. He was the son of the farm owner where my mother worked. He was 23. Said he loved me. That he was going to marry me. But when he found out I was expecting a child, her voice broke. He said I was a liar, that I had laid with other men, that child wasn't his. "And your mother?" John asked, still in that strangely controlled voice. "Died when I was 15. Marianne wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I had no one else, no family, nowhere to go. And when he rejected me, when I saw I was going to be alone, with no money, no support, with a baby," she sobbed, "I was desperate, terrified. An old woman in the village said she could solve my problem. I didn't know, didn't understand right what she was going to do. I only knew I couldn't think of anything but fear." "You were 16, John repeated, as if processing. "You were a child. Old enough to know right from wrong," Josephine intervened. "I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request." And when she made a desperate decision, a decision that almost killed her, instead of receiving compassion, she received judgment for the rest of her life. He turned to Marianne, and now she could see clearly what was in his eyes. It wasn't disgust. It wasn't disappointment. It was pain. It was anger at the injustice. It was compassion. "Is this it?" he asked gently. "Is this the terrible secret you carried alone for 12 years? Marianne could only nod, tears falling freely now. "And you think," John took a step toward her, "that this makes you less worthy, less valuable, less deserving of being happy?" "It does," she sobbed. "Of course it does. I killed. You were a terrified child," he interrupted her, now very close, "who was put in an impossible situation by a man who should have protected you. You survived, paid a terrible price, but survived, and instead of becoming bitter, you became gentle. Instead of hating the world, you work every day to support yourself with dignity. Instead of wishing ill on others, You embroider star buttons to make a 6-year-old boy smile. But she tried to speak, but he shook his head. How many people know this secret? No one, Marianne whispered. Only the old woman who did the procedure. And she died 2 years ago. I never told anyone, not even Tony, when I married him. I was so afraid. So afraid he would reject me if he knew. And now? John held the envelope. Now that I know, now that this snake here knows. He looked at Josephine with contempt. And is going to spread it to everyone. What are you going to do? Marianne looked at him through tears. I'm going to do what I've always done. I'm going to wake up tomorrow. I'm going to work. I'm going to survive, alone. No, John said, and there was fierce determination in his voice. Not alone. Never again alone. Before Marianne could process what he had said, John turned to Josephine. Go, he ordered. Go spread your gossip. Tell everyone. But when you tell it, you'll have to include the rest of the story. You'll have to tell that it was a 16-year-old child, that she was abandoned, that she almost died, and you'll have to tell that John Sterling not only knows everything, but he doesn't care. That he will continue defending her, that he will continue wanting her in his life and his children's lives. Josephine was open-mouthed. You're saying that even knowing this, you still respect her, still admire her, still want to know her better. Every word came out firm, clear, without hesitation. Because unlike you all, I understand the difference between a person who made a desperate mistake when she was practically a child, and a person who is genuinely evil. And you, he looked around, as if he could see all the gossiping women of the village. You who judge and condemn without mercy. You are the ones who have no place in my life. The town won't accept this. Josephine tried to regain control. They'll turn their backs on her, on you too. Let them turn, John shrugged. I have my land, my children, my work. I don't need anyone's approval to decide who I want near me. He took Marianne's hand. She was trembling, cold despite the heat of the night, and said softly, Come, let's go inside. I'll make some tea and we'll talk. But John, she started. Trust me, he said simply, and there was so much sincerity, so much firmness in those words, that Marianne found herself nodding. Josephine stood there in the street, powerless, watching the two enter the house. She had come to destroy, to humiliate, to win. But somehow, she had lost. The envelope that was supposed to be a weapon had turned into nothing in the hands of a man who refused to judge. Inside the house, John lit the other lamps while Marianne sat down, still shaking. He prepared lemon balm tea. There was a bush in her yard, with practical, efficient movements. When he placed the hot mug in her hands, he sat opposite, waiting. You don't understand, she said finally, voice hoarse from crying so much. I carried this alone for so long. The guilt, the shame, the certainty that I was, that I am. Human, he completed. Someone who made a mistake when she was young and terrified. Someone who paid a terrible price for it. I killed my child, she whispered, the words coming out aloud for the first time, after 12 years choked in her throat. I killed my own child, because I was afraid, because I was a coward. No, John said firmly. You were an abandoned child who made the only decision she could see at that moment, and you paid for it. God knows you paid. You lost the ability to have children. You carried the guilt for 12 years. You were judged, humiliated, rejected. How much more do you need to pay, Marianne? How much more? She looked at him through tears. Aren't you disgusted by me? Disgusted? He shook his head slowly. Marianne, I feel pain for you. I feel anger at the man who used you and abandoned you. I feel anger at the old woman who did that procedure without explaining the consequences. I feel anger at a world that punishes women for mistakes that men make with them. But disgust, for you? Never. Your children, she began. My children, he interrupted her, need to learn that everyone has a past, that everyone carries pain, that life isn't simple, black or white. And that the most important thing isn't the mistake you made, but who you chose to be after it. The silence that fell was different now. Marianne took a sip of tea, feeling the warmth go down her throat, spreading through her chest. For the first time in 12 years, she had said it aloud. She had told. And the person who heard hadn't rejected her, hadn't condemned her, had chosen to stay. I don't know if I can believe you'll keep thinking this way, she said softly. When the scandal spreads, when everyone knows, when your children hear other kids talking, then I'll deal with that when it happens, John said simply. But I won't give up on you because of what others will think or say. I've already decided, Marianne. And John Sterling doesn't go back on his word. She wanted to believe. God, how she wanted to believe. But the fear was still there, coiled in her chest like a snake. Tell me something, John said after a moment. If you could go back in time, if you could have that baby, knowing everything that came after, all the suffering, all the judgment, would you choose differently? Marianne closed her eyes. It was a question she had asked herself 1,000 times in sleepless nights. 1,000 times she had imagined what it would be like if she had been strong enough to have the baby alone. If she had endured the shame, the poverty, the judgment. I don't know, she answered honestly. Part of me says yes, that I should have been stronger. But another part remembers how young I was, how afraid I was, how I saw no way out. She opened her eyes, meeting his. I know what I did was wrong. I know that with all certainty. But I also know that that 16-year-old girl did the best she could with what she had. And I pity her. I pity myself. Then maybe it's time to forgive her, John said gently. Forgive that scared girl. Let her rest. And move on. His words touched something deep in Marianne. To forgive herself. It was something she had never considered. She had thought she needed to carry that guilt forever, as penance, as deserved punishment. I don't know if I can, she admitted. Then let me help you, he said. Let me remind you every day that you are worth more than your worst mistake. Let me... A scream cut through the night. Both jumped up. The scream came from outside, distant but clear. Cries of fire, fire, echoed through the night. John ran to the door, Marianne behind him. On the horizon, in the direction of the village, an orange glow lit up the sky. Dark smoke rose in thick columns. My God, Marianne whispered, it's the church. The church is on fire. Leave a justice for Marianne in the comments, and tell me, which part of this story touched you the most? John was already running to the buggy. Come. We have to help. But when they reached the village, what they found was worse than they imagined. It wasn't just the church. Mrs. Agnes's house, next to the chapel, was also in flames. And in the middle of the street, a group of men was holding someone. When they approached, Mary Ann saw who it was, and her blood ran cold. It was Mrs. Agnes's son, drunk, holding a broken lamp, laughing like a madman. It's over, he screamed. It's all over. The curse is over. I set fire to the witch's house. I set fire to the church that protects witches. It's over. Mr. Higgins, the store owner, held the young man with the help of two others. When he saw John and Mary Ann arriving, he shouted, John, he's talking about your farm. He says he was going to set fire to the farm because you protect a cursed woman. The boys, did you leave the boys alone? John's face went white. Aunt Martha is with them. No, she's not, shouted Bernice, the washerwoman, covered in soot. I saw her going down earlier. Said she was going to sleep at her friend's house because her back hurt. The boys are alone." John didn't wait to hear more. He ran to the buggy, but Marianne was faster. She climbed up, grabbed the reins, and whipped the horses before he had even finished getting in. "Go!" she screamed, and the animals bolted. The road to the farm had never seemed so long. 5 miles that felt like 5 leagues. Marianne's heart beat so hard it hurt. The children, the 3 sweet, innocent children who had nothing to do with this war of adults. When the farm appeared at the top of the hill, the horror was confirmed. Orange flames lit the side of the farmhouse. Dark smoke rose heavy against the starry sky. "No!" John's scream was pure pain. Marianne didn't even wait for the buggy to stop completely. She jumped, fell, got up, and ran. John was beside her, both running toward the burning house. "Pete, Tess, Anthony!" John screamed. A window opened on the 2nd floor. Tess appeared, coughing, face covered in soot. "Dad, it's on fire! The boys are trapped in the room!" "Get out! Jump!" John shouted. "I can't! The door is locked and there's fire on the other side!" Marianne looked around desperately. There was a ladder leaning against the barn. Without thinking twice, she ran there, grabbed the ladder. It was heavy, but adrenaline gave her strength, and dragged it to the house. "Help me!" she shouted to John. The two lifted the ladder, leaning it against the wall below the window where Tess was. It didn't reach the window, but it got close. "I'm going," Marianne said, already starting to climb. "It's dangerous." John held the base of the ladder. "Your children are in there." She climbed. Every rung was an eternity. Smoke burned her eyes, her throat. The heat was intense, almost unbearable. But she kept climbing. When she reached the top, she stretched out her arms. "Tess, come!" The girl hesitated. The top of the ladder was almost 3 feet below the window. She would have to jump. "I'll catch you, trust me." Tess looked back at the smoke-filled room where her younger brothers coughed desperately. She looked at Marianne and jumped. The impact almost knocked Marianne off the ladder, but she held on. She held tight, arms around the girl, feet firm on the wooden rungs. "It's okay, I got you. Go down fast." Tess went down, and as soon as she reached John below, Marianne climbed one more rung, balanced dangerously, and managed to reach the windowsill. "Anthony! Pete! Come!" Anthony appeared at the window, carrying his little brother in his arms. Pete was crying, coughing, terrified. "Give him to me." Marianne held out her arms. Anthony, with care, passed his little brother. Marianne held the 6-year-old boy, feeling his weight, his little body trembling with fear. She descended slowly, every step careful, holding Pete tight against her chest. When she reached the ground, she passed the boy to John and climbed again. "Now you, Anthony, come." The 8-year-old boy looked down. The drop seemed huge. He was scared. "Anthony, look at me," Marianne shouted, and there was command in her voice. "You can do it. You are strong and brave. I will catch you." The boy took a deep breath and jumped. Marianne felt her arms crack with the impact, felt the ladder sway dangerously, but she held on. She held on as if his life depended on it, because it did. She held on with all the strength she had, all determination, all the love that had grown in her chest for those 3 children. "Climb down," she whispered in his ear. "Climb down slowly." The two went down together, and when Marianne's feet finally touched the ground, her legs gave way. She fell to her knees, Anthony still hugging her, and began to cough violently. John was there, the 3 children clinging to him, all crying, all alive. He looked at Marianne with an expression she had never seen before. It was gratitude. It was respect. It was something deeper, more powerful. It was love. The house continued to burn, but the men from the village had arrived and were forming a bucket brigade. The part where the children slept was saved. The rest, well, the rest could be rebuilt. Mary Ann sat on the grass, still coughing, body aching, hands shaking, now that the adrenaline was fading. John sat beside her, the three children between them, all hugged in a knot of arms and tears. "You saved them," he said, voice hoarse. "You saved my children." "It was the only thing that mattered," she replied simply. Pete broke loose from his father's hug and threw himself into Mary Ann's arms, his little face dirty with soot pressed against her neck. "I was so scared," he sobbed. "So scared." "I know, my love." She hugged him tight, ignoring the pain in her arms. "I know, but it's over. You're safe now." "You won't go away?" he asked, little eyes wide and frightened. "Promise you won't go away." Mary Ann looked at John over the boy's head. He was holding Tess with one arm and Anthony with the other, but his eyes were fixed on her, waiting, asking. "No," she said, to Pete, but looking at John. "I won't go away." And when the sun rose a few hours later, it found the six of them, John, Mary Ann, and the three children, still sitting there on the grass, embraced, while smoke rose from the ruins of the house. But they were together. They were alive. And they were, for the first time, complete. The village had tried to destroy her. It had exposed her darkest secret. It had torched the life John built. But in the midst of the ashes and destruction, something new had been born. Something that no one, not the gossiping women, not the cruel judgments, not the flames of hate, could destroy. A family. The first rays of sun cut through the morning mist when Father Anselm arrived at Cross Creek Farm. He had spent the night helping to put out the fire at the church and Mrs. Agnes's house. And now he came to see with his own eyes the damage to John's property. What he found made him stop in his tracks. There, sitting on the dew-damp grass, were John Sterling and Mary Ann Carter. Her covered in soot, him with a face marked by smoke, with three children sleeping between them. Pete was curled up in Mary Ann's lap, like a kitten, his little head on her shoulder. Tess slept leaning against John, but with one hand holding Mary Ann's skirt. And Anthony was laid across both their laps, like a human bridge connecting those two people. The priest was old, had seen much in life, but that image touched him in a way he didn't expect. It wasn't just exhaustion he saw in those two adults. It was something deeper. It was peace in the midst of chaos. It was certainty in the midst of destruction. "Good morning," he said softly, not to wake the children. John raised his eyes. "Father Anselm, the church, was hit but not destroyed. We'll be able to recover it." The priest looked at the farmhouse, half of it blackened by flames, part of the roof destroyed. And here, the children's rooms were saved. The rest, John shrugged, but there was deep wariness in the gesture. "The rest is wood and tile. We rebuild." The priest noticed the we. He noticed how John looked at Mary Ann when he said it, and how she nodded slightly, as if it were natural that she was included in that we. "Father," Mary Ann said softly, "I need to speak with you about things that happened." "I know," the priest said gently. "Mrs. Josephine came by the church last night, before the fire. She told it, to me and half the world." Mary Ann closed her eyes, and John saw the pain cross her face. "And you came here too," she began, voice trembling, "to tell me I'm no longer welcome in the church? That I'm a sinner? That—" "I came here," the priest interrupted her, sitting on the grass beside them, "to tell you that you are human, that you erred when you were practically a child, that you paid a terrible price. And that God, unlike some people who call themselves Christians, knows the difference between a mistake made in desperation and a genuinely evil heart. Tears began to fall silently down Marianne's face. John extended his free hand. The other held Tess, and held hers. "I have been a priest for 42 years, the old man continued, looking at the horizon where the sun rose, dyeing everything gold. I have heard confessions of every kind. I have seen people do terrible things out of greed, cruelty, pure pleasure in causing pain. And I have also seen people do wrong things out of fear, desperation, seeing no other way out." He turned to Marianne. "You are not evil, my daughter. You were a scared girl who made a terrible decision, and you carried that cross alone for 12 years. But do you know what I saw last night? I saw you risk your own life to save 3 children who aren't even yours. I saw courage. I saw love. I saw redemption. Father," she sobbed, "I cannot say that what you did 12 years ago was right," he said honestly. "It would be a lie. But I can say that you have already paid. You have already suffered. You have already repented. And now you need to learn to live again. Need to accept that God forgives, even when we can't forgive ourselves." John cleared his throat, emotional. The priest was known for rigidity, for unshakable faith, for harsh words when necessary. But there he was, offering mercy where the Christians of the village offered only judgment. "The town will make a scandal," the priest continued, now looking at John. "They already are, but I will make it very clear in Sunday's sermon. Whoever judges instead of having compassion, whoever condemns instead of welcoming, whoever spreads hate in God's name, that person does not know God for real." "Thank you, Father," John said, voice hoarse. The old priest stood up, brushing off his cassock. "Now I'm going back to the village. There is work to do." But before, he placed his hand on Marianne's head in a paternal gesture. "You are welcome in God's house, my daughter. Always were, always will be. And anyone who says otherwise will have to go through me." He walked away, leaving the two alone again with the sleeping children. The sun was higher now, hot, promising a scorching day. From afar came voices, the farm workers arriving, horrified by the damage, ready to help with reconstruction. "John," Marianne said softly, "I can't stay here. I can't. This will destroy you. Your reputation, your name, your business. When people know—" "They already know," he said calmly. "Josephine made sure of that. And do you know what I discovered? That I don't care as much as I thought I would. But your children, my children," he looked at the 3 sleeping kids, "almost died yesterday. And the person who saved them was you. Do you think I'm going to care what gossiping biddies have to say after that? But when they grow up, when they hear the stories, then I will tell them the truth," John said, looking directly into her eyes. "I will tell them you were a 16-year-old girl who was used and abandoned, who made a desperate decision and paid a terrible price. I will tell them you carried that pain alone for 12 years. And I will tell them that when you saw 3 children in danger, you didn't think twice before risking your life to save them. And then I will ask them, who is the real person? The terrified 16-year-old girl, or the brave woman you became?" Marianne couldn't stop crying. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of something she dared not name yet, but which was growing in her chest like a stubborn plant sprouting in arid soil. Pete stirred in her lap, opening his little eyes. When he saw where he was, still in her arms, he smiled. That toothless, innocent smile that carried no judgment whatsoever. "I dreamed you were flying," he said, voice sleepy. "Flying like a bird and catching me before I fell." "It was just a dream, baby." Marianne kissed his forehead. "No, it wasn't," Pete insisted, with the absolute certainty of children. "You flew, climbed that ladder and caught me. You are my angel." Tess woke up next, and when she saw the 2 adults, Her eyes filled with tears. She threw herself at Marianne, hugging her tight. "I thought we were going to die," she sobbed. "Thought I was going to die and never see my dad again." "Never see you again." "But you didn't die." Marianne held the girl, Pete still in her lap, Anthony starting to wake up. "You're here, alive, safe." Anthony, the quietest of the three, sat up and looked at Marianne for a long moment. Then, with that seriousness of a child too old for his age, he said, "Are you going to be our mother now?" The silence that fell was tense. Marianne looked at John, terrified, not knowing what to answer. But John smiled, that half-smile of his that rarely appeared, and said, "That depends on her, son, but I hope so." 3 months passed like a breath of wind in the hills. The farmhouse at Cross Creek was rebuilt with the help of almost all the workers in the region. Men who respected John, who knew of his honesty, of his hard work, came to help. They brought wood, tiles, nails, sweat. And in 6 weeks, the house was standing again, even better than before, with an extra room that John insisted on adding. "Never know when you might need it," he said, but everyone knew who that room was being prepared for. Marianne continued living in her cottage, continued sewing, but now she spent Sundays at the farm, then Sundays and Wednesdays, then almost every day. She taught Tess to sew, listened to Pete's wild stories, helped Anthony with the numbers the boy liked so much, and every night when she returned home, John insisted on walking her back. They talked on her porch for hours, about everything and nothing. About his childhood on the farm, about the parents he had lost early, about the first wife he loved but whom God took, about his fears of not being good enough as a father, about his dreams for his children. And Marianne, slowly, began to tell too about the seamstress mother who raised her alone, about the man who deluded her, about the 12 years of guilt and loneliness, about the night she thought of giving up on everything, but woke up the next day and continued, because quitting would be admitting the gossips were right about her. "You are the strongest person I know," John said one of those nights, holding her hand in the gloom of the porch. "I'm not strong," she replied, "just too stubborn to die." He laughed, that deep and rare laugh, and pulled her closer. "Then let's be stubborn together." In the village, the gossip continued for a few weeks. Mrs. Agnes rebuilt her house and continued with her venomous tongue, but discovered that fewer and fewer people listened to her. Mrs. Zola moved to the big city to live with a daughter, tired of the village scandal. And Mrs. Josephine, well, Josephine discovered that breaking into someone else's property and stealing documents had consequences. John didn't report her to the authorities, but he made it very clear that if she opened her mouth about Marianne again, he would. Father Anselm kept his promise. The Sunday after the fire, he went up to the pulpit and gave a sermon no one forgot. He spoke about the adulterous woman Christ saved from stoning, about how the Pharisees wanted to condemn her, but Jesus said, "He who is without sin, cast the first stone." He spoke about mercy, about forgiveness, about how judging is easy, but having compassion takes courage. And in the end, he looked directly at the gossiping women and said, "If you want to be true Christians, learn to love as Christ loved, without conditions, without judgments, without cruelty disguised as moral righteousness." Marianne was there, sitting between John and the children, and for the first time in 3 years, she raised her head in church, did not lower her eyes, did not shrink. She was there, present, whole. Some people turned their faces, others looked with curiosity, but a surprising number nodded in greeting. Women who also had their secrets, their mistakes, their hidden pains. Women who understood that life isn't black or white, but a bunch of complicated shades of gray. It was on a November afternoon, with stifling heat foreshadowing rain, that John finally asked the question he had been rehearsing for weeks. They were under the mango tree, the same one where Mary Ann had comforted Tess months ago, watching the 3 children play in the yard. Pete chased chickens, laughing loudly. Tess practiced the sewing stitches Mary Ann had taught her, tongue sticking out in concentration. And Anthony read aloud to both of them, a storybook he had gotten from the priest. "Have you noticed how they've changed?" John asked. Mary Ann smiled. "I noticed. Pete doesn't cry at night anymore. Tess walks with her head held higher. And Anthony laughs now. I didn't know he knew how to laugh." "It was you," John said simply. "You brought life back to this house. Brought life back to me." She turned to look at him, and there was something different in his manner. Nervousness, anxiety, things she rarely saw in that man always so sure of himself. "Mary Ann Carter," he said, and his voice was hoarse. "I am a simple man. I don't know how to make pretty speeches. I don't know how to promise grand things. But I know one thing. I want you in my life. I want you in my children's lives. I want to wake up every day knowing you are here. I want to grow old by your side. I want—" He stopped, swallowed hard, and took something from his pocket. It was a simple ring, gold, with a small blue stone set in it. "It was my grandmother's," he explained. "Passed to my mother, and she left it to me before she died. Said I should give it to the woman I truly loved." Tears were already streaming down Mary Ann's face. "I love you," John said, and the words came out raw, honest, unadorned. "I love your strength. I love your gentleness. I love how you are with my children. I love how you survived everything life threw at you, and still managed to smile. I love you, Mary Ann. All of you. Past, present, future. Everything." "John," she began, but her voice failed. "Marry me," he asked, "not because I need someone to take care of the boys. I know you are not a nanny. Not because I pity you. I know you don't need pity. Marry me because I love you. Because you love me too. I know you do. Because we are better together than apart. Marry me." Mary Ann looked at that man, big, strong, with an even bigger heart, who had chosen her, who had defended her against the whole world, who had looked at the worst of her and decided to stay. She looked at the 3 children in the yard, who had become hers at some point over those months. She looked at the farm, at the rebuilt house, at the life that could be hers if she had the courage to accept. And for the first time in 12 years, Mary Ann allowed herself to believe she deserved to be happy. "Yes," she said, voice firm despite the tears. "Yes, I will marry you." John slid the ring onto her finger. It was a little loose, but she didn't care and pulled her into a hug. A tight, lingering embrace that spoke of promises and fresh starts and unlikely loves that rise from the ashes. "Dad is kissing Mary Ann!" Pete shouted from the yard, and Tess and Anthony dropped everything to come running. The 3 threw themselves onto the 2 adults, and there they stayed, a knot of arms and laughter and happy tears, under the mango tree, while the afternoon sun turned everything gold. The wedding was simple. In the small rebuilt chapel, with Father Anselm officiating, a few people present. Aunt Martha, who cried during the entire ceremony. Mr. Higgins, who closed the store to attend. Bernice and Kitty, the washerwomen. Some farm workers. And 3 children in the front row, dressed in new clothes Mary Ann had sewn personally, with care and love. Mary Ann wore a simple white cotton dress, but she had flowers in her hair that Tess had picked in the morning. John wore the suit he kept for special occasions, hair combed back, hands shaking slightly when he placed the wedding band on her finger. "I pronounce you husband and wife," Father Anselm said with a proud smile. "And may God bless this union with many years of love and happiness." Some of the gossiping women did not attend. Mrs. Agnes made a point of walking by the church right at the time of the ceremony. Head turned the other way in obvious contempt, but Mary Ann didn't care. She had learned that the approval of some people was worth nothing, and that the approval of the right people was worth everything. The party was in the farmyard. They butchered 2 hogs, made bean stew, rice, stuffing, greens, fried cassava. Aunt Martha made a corn cake that melted in the mouth. There was fiddle music, singing, children running, loud laughter. It was simple, authentic, perfect. At night, when the guests left and the children finally slept, after much protest from Pete, who wanted to stay up, John and Mary Ann stood alone on the porch of the house. "Mrs. Sterling," John said, testing the name on his tongue. Mary Ann smiled. "Still sounds strange. You'll get used to it." He pulled her close, and she fit naturally into his arms. "Are you happy?" She thought about the question. Happy? 12 years ago, she had thought she would never be happy again. She had thought happiness was something for other people. People without a past, without mistakes, without stains on their souls. "Yes," she answered, and it was true. "I am happy. Even knowing there will always be people judging, even knowing the past never goes away completely." "The past never goes away," Mary Ann agreed, looking at the stars dotting the dark sky. "But I learned something. The past doesn't define who I am now. It defines where I came from, the scars I carry. But it doesn't define who I choose to be from here on out." John kissed the top of her head. "You are wise, you know." "I'm not wise. I just learned the hard way." They stood there in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the night. Crickets singing, wind in the trees, distant lowing of cattle. It was peace. It was home. It was a new beginning. "John," Mary Ann said after a while, "thank you." "For what?" "For choosing me, for defending me, for looking at me and seeing beyond what everyone else saw. For giving me a family when I thought I was going to die alone. For teaching me that I can still be loved." He turned her face up, looking directly into her eyes in the dim lamplight. "I thank you," he said, "for bringing life back to this house, for loving my children as if they were yours, for having the courage to start over, even with fear, for teaching me that love doesn't need to be perfect to be true." They kissed there, under the stars, and it was a kiss that sealed promises. Promises of hard days faced together, of judgments ignored, of love built brick by brick, day after day, choice after choice. The years passed gently. Mary Ann turned that house into a true home. Flowers in the window, hand-sewn curtains, embroidered tablecloths. She taught Tess to sew so well that the girl started making her own clothes. She taught Pete to have patience, to finish what he started. And with Anthony, she was simply present, listening, supporting, allowing the quiet boy to be exactly who he was. John continued working hard on the farm, but now he returned home with more haste, because home had become more than 4 walls and a roof. It had become the place where Mary Ann was, where the children's laughter echoed, where he was not just the farmer, the widower, the strong man. He was just John, husband, father, human. The village in time accepted it. Not everyone. It would never be everyone. Mrs. Agnes took her grudge to the grave when she died 5 years later, still grumbling about that woman. But most people forgot the old gossip and found new ones to occupy themselves. After all, life went on. It always went on. Tess grew up and became a beautiful young woman, owner of a small sewing shop in the village, continuing Mary Ann's legacy. Pete inherited his father's love for the land and became a farmer, buying a neighboring property. And Anthony, the quiet one, revealed a talent for numbers that led him to study in the big city, returning every weekend to visit his parents. And Marianne? She grew old beside John, hair gray, hands more calloused, but smile lighter. She never had children of her own womb. That had been taken from her long ago. But she had 3 children of the heart. She had grandchildren who called her grandma naturally. She had a full, complete, happy life. On a summer afternoon, already old, sitting on the same porch where John had asked for her hand decades ago, she looked at the golden horizon and thought about the journey. She thought about the 16-year-old girl, terrified, who made the hardest decision of her life. She thought about the 28-year-old woman, humiliated and alone, who almost gave up on everything. She thought about the day John roared like a lion to defend her. She thought about the flames that almost took everything, but in the end, purified, rebuilt, transformed. "What are you thinking about?" John asked, sitting beside her. He was also old now, hair completely white, back a little bent, but his eyes still had that shine when he looked at her. "I'm thinking," Marianne said, taking his hand, calloused, strong, holding hers for so many years, "that it was worth it. Everything. Every tear, every pain, every night of fear. Because it brought me here. To you. To this life. Do you regret nothing?" She thought honestly about the question. "I regret the mistake I made when I was 16. I will always regret it. But I learned to live with that regret. I learned that it doesn't define me. And I learned, finally, to forgive myself." John squeezed her hand. "I love you, Marianne. Today as much as the day I asked you to marry me. More, even." "I love you too," she said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for being my lion, for roaring when I had no voice, for protecting me when I couldn't protect myself." They stayed there, 2 old people who had lived a whole life together, watching the sun set over Cross Creek Farm. And when night fell, complete and starry, they went into the house holding hands. As they always did, as they always would. Because true love isn't the one that is born in perfect conditions. It is the one that is born amidst chaos, ashes, judgments, and chooses, every single day, to keep growing. It is the one that roars like a lion when needed, and whispers like a breeze when it can. It is the one that doesn't give up, never gives up. Epilogue, 20 years after the death of Marianne, who departed peacefully, sleeping. Beside John on a serene spring night, Tess opened an old trunk in the attic of the farmhouse. Inside it, carefully stored, were hundreds of pieces of clothing. Shirts with star buttons, dresses with delicate embroidery, handkerchiefs with carefully drawn initials, and a letter. Tess opened the letter with trembling hands. It was from her mother, the mother of her heart, the only one she truly knew. "My dear Tess, if you are reading this, it is because I have already departed. Do not be sad. I lived a happier life than I ever imagined possible. Keep these clothes. Each one of them tells a story of starting over, of forgiveness, of love that is born where least expected. When your children and grandchildren ask about me, tell the truth, the whole truth. Do not hide my mistakes. Do not paint a perfect picture. Tell them I erred, that I suffered, that I was judged, and tell them I found a man, your father, who loved me despite everything, who defended me like a lion. And then teach them the lesson I learned. No one is just their worst day. No one is just their biggest mistake. We are the sum of all our choices, the bad and the good. And always, always, we have the chance to choose again. Choose love. Choose compassion. Choose to defend those who cannot defend themselves. Choose to roar when needed. With all my love, Mary Ann Sterling. Tess folded the letter with care, tears streaming down her face. Down below, in the yard, her own children played. A new generation that would never know the taste of cruelty their grandmother had faced. A generation raised with love, with truth, with the certainty that mistakes do not define, but choices do. And in that house, built on the ashes of hate, rebuilt with the hands of love, the story of Mary Ann and John would continue to be told. Generation after generation. A story of lions that roar, of women who survive, of unlikely loves that become eternal. A story from the countryside. True, painful, beautiful, a story of us all.